Happy Friday, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good day. I'm here to read the next chapter of The Witches' Summer Holiday. And when we left off, the main character had come in contact with a witch. And he really had only seen him one time. So, here we go. Summer holidays. The Easter holidays came and went, and the summer term began at school. My grandmother and I were already planned to take our summer holiday in Norway, and we talked about almost nothing else every evening. She had booked a cabin for each of us on a boat from Newcastle to Oslo at the earliest possible moment after my school broke up. From Oslo, we were going to take me to a place she knew down in the south coast near Arendal, where she spent her own summer holidays as a child nearly 8 years ago. All day long, she said, my brother and I were out in the rowing boat. The whole coast is dotted with tiny islands, and there is nobody on them. We used to explore them and dive into the sea off the lovely smooth granite rocks, and sometimes on the way out we would drop to the anchor and fish for cod and whiting. And if we caught anything, we would build a fire on the island and fry the fish in the pan for our lunch. There is no finer fish in the world than absolutely fresh cod. What did you use for bait, Grandmama, when you were fishing? Mussels, she said. Everyone uses mussels for bait in Norway, and we didn't catch any fish. We would boil the mussels in the saucepan and eat those. Were they good? Delicious, she said. Cook them from the seawater, and they are tender and salty. What else did you do, Grandmama? We used to row out and wave the shrimp boats on their way home, and they would stop to give us a handful of shrimps each. The shrimps were still warm from having been just cooked and would sit in the rowing boat, peeling them, gobbling them up. And the head was in the best part. The head, I said. You squeeze the head between your teeth and suck out the inside. It's marvelous. You and I will do those things this summer, my darling, she said. Grandmama, I said, I can't wait. I simply can't wait to go. Nor can I, she said. When there was only 3 weeks of summer term left, an awful thing happened. My grandmother got pneumonia. She became very ill, and trained nurse moved into the house to look after her. The doctor explained to me that pneumonia is not normally as dangerous illness nowadays because of penicillin, but the person in more than 80 years old, as my grandmother was, then it was very dangerous indeed. He said he didn't even dare move her to the hospital in her condition, so she stayed in the bedroom, and I hung about outside the door with oxygen cylinders, and all sorts of other frightening things were taken into her. Can I go in and see her? I asked. No, dear, the nurse said. Not at the moment. A fat and jolly lady called Miss Spring, who used to come and clean our house every day, also moved in and slept in the house. Miss Spring looked after me and cooked my meals. I liked her very much, and she wasn't a patch on my grandmother for telling stories. One evening, about 10 days later, the doctor came downstairs and said, you can go in and see her now, but only for a short time. She's asking for you. I flew up the stairs and burst into my grandmother's room and threw myself into her arms. So there's a picture of him going to visit his grandma. Hey there, the nurse said. Be careful with her. Will you be all right now, Grandmama? I asked. The worst is over, she said. I'll soon be up again. Will she? I turned to the nurse. Oh, yes, the nurse answered, smiling. She told us she simply had to get better because she had to look after you. I gave her another hug. They won't let me have a cigar, she said, but you wait till they're gone. She's a tough old bird, the nurse said. We'll have her up in another week. The nurse was right. Within a week, my grandmother was thumping around the house with her gold-topping cane, interfering with Miss Spring's cooking. I thank you for all your help, Mrs. Spring, she said, but you can go home now. Oh, no, I can't, Mrs. Spring said. Doctor told me to see that you take it very easy the next few days. The doctor said more than that. He dropped a bombshell on my grandmother and me by telling them on account of we were at risk in the journey to Norway this summer. Rubbish, my grandmother cried. I've promised him we'll go. It's too far, the doctor said. It would be very dangerous. But I'll tell you what you can do. You can take your grandson to a nice hotel on the south coast of England instead. The sea air is just what you need." "Oh, no," I said. "Do you want your grandmother to die?" the doctor asked me. "Never," I said. "Then don't let her go to the long journey this summer. She's not yet strong enough. And stop her smoking those vile black cigars." In the end, the doctor had his way about the holiday, but not about the cigars. Rooms were booked for us in the place called the Hotel Magnificent in the famous seaside town of Bournemouth. Bournemouth, my grandmother told me, it was full of old people like herself. They retired there by the thousands because the air was bracing and healthy, and it kept them, so they believed, alive for a few extra years. "Does it?" I asked. "Of course not," she said. It's a Tomoid. But just for once, I think we've got to obey the doctor." Soon after that, my grandmother and I took the train to Bournemouth and settled into the Hotel Magnificent. It was an enormous white building on the seafront, and it looked like me in the pretty boring place to spend a summer holiday in. I had my own separate bedroom, but there was a door connecting my room to my grandmother's room, so we could visit each other without going in the corridor. Just before we left the Bournemouth, my grandmother had given me a consolation, a present of 2 white mice in a little cage, and of course I took them with me. They were terrific fun, those mice. I called them William and Mary. In the hotel, I set out right away teaching them to do tricks. The first trick I taught them was to creep up the sleeve of the jacket and come out my neck. Then I taught them to climb up the back of my neck and onto the top of my head. I did this by putting cake crumbs on my hair. On the very first morning after our arrival, the chambermaid was making my bed when one of the mice poked its head out from under the sheets. The maid let out a shriek and brought a dozen people running to see was being murdered. I was reported to the manager. There followed an unpleasant scene in manager's office with the manager and my grandmother and me. The manager, whose name was Mr. Stringer, was a bristly man in a black tailcoat. "I cannot permit mice in my hotel, madam," he said to my grandmother. "How dare you say that when your rotten hotel is full of rats anyway?" my grandmother cried. "Rats!" cried Mr. Stranger, going mauve in the face. "There are no rats in this hotel." "I saw one this very morning," my grandmother said. "It was running down the corridor into the kitchen." "That is not true," cried Mr. Stringer. "You had better get the rat catcher at once," my grandmother said, "before I report you to the public health authorities. I expect there's rats scuttling all over the kitchen floor and stealing the..." So there's a picture of him playing with the mice and then them talking to the manager. "Food off the shelves, jumping in and out of the soup." "Never," cried Mr. Stranger. "No wonder my breakfast toast was all nibbled around the edges this morning," my grandmother went on relentlessly. "No wonder it was a nasty, ratty taste. If you're not careful, the health people will be ordering an entire hotel to be closed before everyone gets the typhoid fever." "You are not being serious, madam," Mr. Stranger said. "I was never more serious in my life," my grandmother said, "and you are not going to allow my grandson to keep his white mice in his room." The manager knew he was being beaten. "May I suggest a compromise, madam?" he said. "I will permit him to keep them in his room as long as they are never allowed out of the cage. How's that?" "That will suit us very well," my grandmother said, and she stood up and marched out of the room with me behind her. There was no way you can train mice inside a cage, yet I dared not let them out because the chambermaid was spying on me all the time. She had a key to my door, and she kept it bursting in all the hours trying to catch me with the mice out of the cage. She told me the first mouse to break the rules would be drowned in a bucket of water by the hall porter. I decided to seek a safer place where I could carry them with their training. There must surely be an empty room in an enormous hotel. I put one of the mice into the trouser pocket and wandered downstairs in search of a secret spot. The ground floor of the hotel was a maze of public rooms, all of them named the gold letters on the door. I wandered through the lounge, the smoking room, the card room, the reading room, and the drawing room. None of them was empty. I went down the long, wide corridor, and at the end of it came to the ballroom. There were double doors. I leaped leading into it. In front of the doors there was a large notice on the board stand. The notice on the board said, "RSPCC meeting. Strictly private. This room is reserved for annual meeting of the Royal Society of the Prevention of Cruelty to Children." The double doors into the room were open. I peeped in a colossal room. There were rows and rows of chairs, all facing platform. The chairs were painted gold, and they all had little red cushions on the seats. but there were not a soul in sight. I sidled cautiously into the room. What a lovely, secret, silent place it was. The meeting of the Royal Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Children must have taken place earlier that day, and now they were all gone home. Even if they did suddenly come pouring in, they would be a wonderful kind of place that would be looked for favor upon a young mouse trainer going about their business. At the back of the room there was a large folding screen and a Chinese dragons painted on it. I decided to be on the safe side and go behind the screen and do my training there. I wasn't a bit frightened by the prevention of cruelty to children people, but there was always a chance that Mr. Stringer and the manager might pop his head around the door. If he did, and if he saw the mice on the door, things would be a hall porter's bucket of water before I could shout, stop. I tiptoed to the back of the room and settled myself on the thick green carpet behind the big screen. There, what a splendid place that was the ideal for mouse training. I took William and Mary out of the trouser pockets. They sat beside me on the carpet, quite well behaved. The trick was going to teach them today was to tightrope walking. It was all a difficult and trained, intelligent mouse to be expert tightrope walker, provided you know exactly how to go about it. First, you must have a piece of string. I had that. Then you must have some cake. A fine currant cake as a favorite food of white mice. They all dotted about. I brought with me a rock cake that I had pocket while having tea with my grandmama the day before. Now what you do, you stretch the string tight between your two hands and you start keeping it very short, only about 3 inches. You put the mouse in your right hand and a little piece of cake on your left hand, the mouse therefore only 3 inches away from the cake. He can see it and he can smell it. This whisks twitch with excitement. He can almost reach the cake by leaning forward, but not quite. He only has to take 2 steps along the string, reach the tasty morsel. He ventures forward on one paw on the string, then the other. If the mouse has a good sense of balance, and the most of them have, we will get across easily. I stared with William. We walked the string with 1 moment's hesitation. I let him have a quick nibble on the cake and whet his appetite. Then I put him back in my right hand. This time I lengthened the string. I made it about 6 inches long. William knew what to do now. With a superb balance, he walked step by step along the string until he reached the cake. He was rewarded with another nibble. Quite soon, William was walking 24-inch tightrope on or rather tight string for one full. Wonderful to watch him. I was enjoying myself tremendously. I was careful to hold the string near the carpet so that he did not lose his balance. He wouldn't have far to fall, but he never fell. William was obviously a natural acrobat, a great tightrope walking mouse. Now it was Mary's turn. I put William on the carpet beside me and rewarded him with some extra crumbs and currant. Then I started going through the same routine all over again with Mary. My blinding ambition, you see, my dream of dreams was to become the owner of the White Mouse Circus. I would have a small stage and red curtains in front of it, and when the curtains were drawn apart, the audience would see my world-famous performing mice walk on the tightrope, swinging from trapeze, turning somersaults in the air, bouncing on trampolines, and all the... So there's a picture of him training his mouse. Rest of it. I would have a white mice riding on white rats, and the rats would gallop furiously around the stage. I was beginning to picture myself traveling first class all over the globe with my famous White Mouse Circus, performing before all the crowned heads of Europe. I was about halfway through Mary's training when suddenly I heard voices outside the ballroom. The sound grew louder, swelled into the great babble of speech in many throats. I recognized the voice as the awful hotel manager, Mr. Stringer. Help, I thought. What, thank heavens, for a huge screen. I crouched behind it, peered through the crack between the two folding sections. I could see the entire length of the width of the ballroom without anyone seeing me. Well, ladies, I'm sure you will be quite comfortable in here, Mr. Stranger's voice was saying then, and through the double doors and marched the black tailcoats and all, spreading his arms wide in his unshed great flocks of ladies. If there is anything we can do for you, do not hesitate to let me know, he went on. Tea will be served to all of you in the Sunshine Terrace after you conclude your meeting. With that, he bowed and scraped himself out of the room, and the vast herd of ladies from the Royal Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Children came streaming in. They were pretty clothes, and all of them had hats on their heads. That's the end of that chapter. On Monday, I will read the meeting. I hope you all have a good weekend. I love and miss you. Mwah!